Now let's talk about data types and access modifiers. So let me first create a file and call it data type, and we will make this a main function. So in a sense, Kotlin is a statically typed language, which means that every variable has a data type which is known during the compile time. So these are the basic data types that Kotlin has. There's Boolean, which has values either true or false. Integer data types, which comes in the form of byte, short, int, or long. Float and double for floating point data types, and for character and string for your string data types. And the values denoted to the right for the integers and the floating is the maximum value supported for this specific data type. So for example, if you try to define a byte of byte type data type and give it a value 128, that's not going to work. It's going to throw you a compile time exception. Imagine this as a container, and that is only it is only possible to hold a value of 127. Anything beyond that, you'd have to go to the next data type, which is short. Anything beyond that, like integer or long, would also work. Now let's talk about access modifiers. So in a sense, there are 4 access modifiers in Kotlin, and they are public, protected, internal, and private. Let's go over each one of them one by one. So the first one is public, which means anything that you define as public is accessible everywhere. It's accessible inside your package, outside your module. Like for example, here the main function, which does not have an access modifier, is public. By default, anything that does not have an access modifier is taken as public. This holds true for variables as well. So I could do var my public and give it an integer value. And because of type inference, I do not have to define the type of this variable, and this is accessible anywhere, and I don't have to use the keyword public. I can remove that and it's all good to go. Now let's go over protected. So for protected, you use it when you want this variable to be accessible by subclasses. Now, what do I mean by subclasses? I'll go over inheritance in a future section, but for now, let me first create a class using the open keyword. We will call this person. And you use the open keyword when you want this class to be extended by other classes, which means that you are essentially denoting that this is a superclass, and any class that needs to use it has to extend it instead of instantiating it. We'll go into classes in a future section, but for now, I just want you to understand the keyword protected. So let's define a protected variable here called age, and give it a value of 0. And let's make another class called person. And we will extend, let's make another class called man, and we will extend man from the class person, which means that it inherits the properties of person. And let us make a function here, get man age, and return age. So this age is accessible, and okay, I need to put in a return type for my function, and that is going to be an int. So this age is accessible in my subclass. So what I did here was I defined an open class using the open keyword, and I defined a class which extends or inherits properties from the person class using the colon sign here. And then what I did was I created a function inside my man class and returned the variable which was technically a protected protected variable. Now you won't be able to use this outside this class anywhere or outside the man's class anywhere unless anything is any class that might be extending this specific variable. So this specific class. So this variable is accessible only to its subclasses, and that is why we use the keyword protected. Next, we come to the keyword internal. So when you define something as internal, it means that it's internally accessible inside your module, outside the package, but inside your module. Now, what does that mean? So let's say I define a function here called internal function, and we will name it as my internal. So you are able to use this function anywhere inside your module. So I could literally call this from any class or any module inside any of the classes that I define here. However, internal denotes that this specific method is not accessible outside your module, which means that if you archive your application into a Java archive file, any other module or any other application using your Java archive will not have access to this internal method. And that is the reason why we use the internal keyword. So it is like public within your module, but it's not accessible anywhere outside your module. Next, let's talk about private. Private is the most restrictive keyword, and that means that I can create a private variable here. And let me create an integer variable. We'll define it of type int. I don't have to make it int, and int is private to this class only, which means that I can access it over here, but I won't be able to access it outside of my class. So integer won't be accessible in, let's say, the data types class which we just created. And if you put in your cursor there, it says make my int public. So that is what we have for access modifiers.